Welcome to part 2 of our first poetry lesson. So in this part, we'll be reading some poetry, and I'm going to point out some helpful things to notice about how people write their poetry, so that hopefully it helps you to write your first poem. So let's begin. So this poem is pretty short. It's called Invitation by Shel Silverstein. I'll read it once through. If you are a dreamer, come in. If you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer. If you're a pretender, come sit by my fire, for we have some flax golden tales to spin. Come in, come in. So, what's the poem about? Well, to me, the poem is paying tribute. It's celebrating dreamers, idealists. And it's a playful poem. It's written for people who are still a child at heart. A couple of things about this poem that stood out to me was the use of repetition. So repetition is when you repeat words or repeat phrases through a poem. And in this poem, we can see that Shel Silverstein, the writer, repeated the word dreamer quite a lot. So in the first and second line, he also repeated the phrase come in. So we can see from his repetition of dreamer that this poem is really about the dreamers. It's about people who are dreaming big, who are keeping their hopes up. And at the end, he repeats "come in" with an exclamation mark. I think it's a nice end to the poem because it welcomes the reader to join in with dreaming, with being a dreamer and dreaming big. He also uses a lot of rhyme in this poem. I don't know if you could hear it when I was reading the poem, but there's a lot of it almost sounds like there's a rhythm to it because of the rhyming words. For example, if you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer. If you're a pretender, come sit by my fire. So you can definitely hear that there are lots of rhyming words there. Dreamer, wisher, liar, hoper, prayer. They all have similar sounds, and that creates a rhythm to the poem. When you're reading it, your voice follows the sounds of the words. What kind of effect does that create? Well, it makes the poem sound like a chant when you're reading it, and that can create a kind of playful atmosphere, a kind of childish atmosphere, like when you're a kid and your mother or father sings nursery rhymes to you. It kind of sounds like that. He also makes the words in and spin rhyme. So if you look at the poem, and I've highlighted the rhyming words in 2 different colors, there's one rhyme that goes dreamer, wisher, liar, and another one that has the rhyming word in and spin. So when you bring the whole poem together, there's definitely this sense of a nursery rhyme, and it creates a very childish atmosphere, brings you back to your childhood. Why is it helpful, or why is it important to rhyme? Well, sometimes, not all poems rhyme, but some poems rhyme because it gives a musicality, it gives your poem music. and it gives it rhythm. And so when someone reads your poem out loud, it sounds good. Finally, something that maybe some of you might have noticed if you are familiar with fairy tales, English fairy tales. So this writer makes reference to some fairy tales in this poem. When he talks about a magic bean buyer, he's referring to Jack and the Beanstalk. Come sit by my fire and flax golden tales to spin makes reference to the fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin. But don't worry if those references don't sound familiar to you. What's important to note for now is the use of repetition and the use of rhyme. So let's move on to another poem, and this one was actually written by one of the migrant workers in Singapore, and his name is Mukul. I'll read the poem again. It's called Me Migrant. Me migrant, live overseas, thousand miles away. Me migrant, beyond borders, mislaying smiles, dawn to dusk, then dawn again, bearing sighs and a cry. Inner heart, love, compassion, kindness lose their meaning. Be careful, no one here and nobody to see and know such pain. Me migrant, live outdoors, outside from you. It's a poem that some of you may find very touching. What stands out to me from the beginning is the repetition again. So the title of the poem is Me Migrant, and Me Migrant appears in the poem 3 times. It really emphasizes the idea of this poem and what it's about. And what it's about is the writer's experience as a migrant worker in Singapore. It also emphasizes that he is the migrant, he is the outsider in a foreign country. There's a handy little tool that maybe you want to take note of, which is the use of alliteration. Alliteration just means when words start with the same letter, and me migrant both start with the letter M. Again, this kind of goes back to sound. When like many letters start with the same letter, when many words start with the same letter rather, it gives you a rhythm to the poem. So what else is interesting about this poem? He uses images of distance, and this again goes back to him being a migrant worker and him being away from home. In his first few lines of the poem, you can see that he writes, he lives overseas, thousand miles away. The thousand miles away, thousand being again repetition, and it illustrates what live overseas means. That he's is saying it in a different way that maybe is that expresses it. Oh dear. In the first few lines of his poem, he uses a lot of images of distance to really emphasize how he's away from home, he's far away from home. So he writes he lives overseas, thousand miles away. Notice that he repeats the word thousand to emphasize how far away from home he is. And he says that he says beyond borders, which again goes back to the fact that he's gone to a different country, he's crossed borders to be where he is now. Beyond borders also is another use of alliteration, like I was saying before, the repetition of the starting letter, and here it's B. So when you read it out loud, beyond borders, you can really hear the rhythm coming through that, and it emphasizes when you say the letter B, it emphasizes how harsh that must feel. Something else I noticed about the poem is how short the lines are. In many of the lines, it's really just 2 words, and the lines that are a bit longer convey a bit more emotion. So, for example, when he says thousand miles away, that's a long line, but it really brings home like the depth, the great, like how great his sadness is because he's so far away from home. Another line that is much longer is dawn to dusk, then dawn again, which to me emphasizes how long his days are, compared to how short the other lines are. Why is that so? To me, I think that he's using short lines to emphasize the pain that he's feeling and maybe how difficult it is for him to understand what he's going through, that he's just describing literally what he's going through day to day. Yeah. And having short lines maybe illustrates how he finds it very difficult to emotionally process what he's going through, and all he can really do is describe the situation he's in. So hopefully that was a little bit helpful. Now it's your turn to try and write a poem. I know it may seem scary. Honestly, your poem doesn't have to look a certain way or sound a certain way. Don't be afraid that it's bad or it sounds stupid or whatever. Just write whatever comes into your head. And you may be surprised. Somebody else might read it and think it's really good, or you might read it again and find that you really liked what you wrote. So what are some tips from me on writing your first poem? Like, bearing in mind that I'm no expert, I'm just writing poetry at home, kind of like you are. I would definitely say that a good tip is to keep a journal for recording down your ideas and feelings. So if you don't have a notebook, maybe just write it down on your phone. For example, what made you happy or sad today? What are the feelings that you're going through right now? Or something that you went through in your day that maybe you want to write about, or you want to express your emotion about. It could be calling home, or it could be having a meal with friends, maybe not now, or maybe like a memory of mealtime with friends. It could be how you feel about all the changes that you might be going through in this time of the virus. It could be memories from your childhood or from your home country. What do you miss about your home country? What do you miss about your hometown? Those are some ideas of things you can write about. And yeah, I'm very excited for you to try and write your first poem. And I'm excited for you to see what you're capable of producing. I'm sure that you'll surprise yourself. Good luck!